work varies based on who's on site, by which PM is writing the sheet or the scope. We're entering an interesting time in the age of AI. Information is being democratized. Fundamentally, the restoration business model is going to be changing, I would estimate. I kind of can't see it happening, beyond 5 years. You get a few grand to invest. I would say go to an E3 class.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another session here of the Violand GPS podcast, Growing Professional Skills, where we like to interview thought leaders, owners, key decision makers in the trades, and kind of get their story, what they do right, what lessons have they learned along the way, what can you learn from them. Really excited to have my friend Kevin Dooley on today. Kevin is did you say president? Am I going with president here?
We can do, sure.
Founder,
we can do president.
owner, El Presidente of Kahi.
Janitor, doer of whatever needs to be done.
Whatever needs to be done. Kevin gets it done up at Kahi. But Kevin's been in the industry for a long time. He's been on both sides of it. And he's been north of the border, south of the border, and can tell you everything that he has seen in the restoration industry. Has a lot of really good opinions and thoughts. And I wanted to bring him on here and kind of pick his brain about the industry and about what we're all facing here in restoration, so that we can one of these days try and make a buck and grow our business and become those successful professionals that we always thought we would be. So Kevin, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to see you, pal.
Yeah, so take us back to the beginning. What kind of shape, before you started Kahi and got involved with what you're doing now, what shaped you as a leader? What was the early influences on you, and who were they, and how'd you get into leadership?
I don't know. I was actually having a little bit about this conversation with my coach this morning, and I think there's in any great leader, they're gonna have some level of unconditional hope, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of folks say hope is not a good mechanism, for lack of choice of words, to think things are going to work just because you have a strong hope for things. But I actually kind of marinating on that a little bit this morning. It is one of those things that I just it's kind of have an inherent belief that you put in an honest effort, you do good by those you're trying to serve, including team and family and everything really in life. That generally should lead to positive outcomes. And that's kind of a weird thing maybe to say, but inherently that's just kind of my nature. And I don't know where that truthfully comes from, and it's not just a hope either. And my dad and my parents obviously raised me to have a work ethic and whatnot, and kind of hankering to always, want to have a growth mindset. And I don't know.
So before go back to before where you got to where you are today, where you're starting to feel like, okay, I've got this. I've built businesses. I know what works. We're always still learning, but early version of you when you first started getting into leadership roles and building businesses, what were some of the mistakes you were making, or what were some of the thoughts you had on leadership that today you look back and go, boy, I was young. I wish I could have redone that?
Over the years, I've always been trying to push on many of individuals to push them to kind of behave in a certain way that I kind of inherently am. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of realized that it doesn't really pan out very well. It's creating an environment of trust 100%. You as an individual leader showing up every day and just and leading through action more than just even words. And then really creating an environment for your team to thrive and grow. And then what I've done in the past is I really tried to push a little bit hard on individuals in that regard, because I was kind of trying to feed my aspirations for my own growth as a leader, and that kind of backfired in certain instances. Sometimes it works smashingly well, truthfully. But that's kind of one thing. And I've kind of realized that you need to like, you know, really just focus on the things that you're striving for and aspiring for, and naturally that'll kind of work itself out amongst others. And that was just one thing, is kind of being a high growth mindset kind of operator that's kind of a little bit, I don't want to use the word alpha, but like kind of in that way where I'm always push, push, push.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that could be, it can be a little bit off putting and not for everybody. And so recognizing that, I think is something that if I was to go back, I'd probably, do things a little bit differently in that regard.
Would you say it's kind of the use of situational leadership then, and being able to start bringing maybe some more empathy or some more listening into it that allowed you to start developing people better?
For sure. Listening is something that I still need plenty of improvement on, even though I'm good in many ways. Maybe, but absolutely, for sure. And empathy is definitely huge, and looking through the eye of those you're serving or working alongside with, right?
So what was the pain point then that you were trying to solve when you put Kahi together and started building out this company?
Ended up my first business that I started when I was my early 20s, coming out of college. We it was a I should also preface this for anyone who may not have come across my story or who I am in the trade, but I come from a lineage of a second generation restorer.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's been in the trade up until this point. He's been an ISRC instructor um, since the late 90s. He was one of the ones that helped co-build what's now known as ASD. And helping him throughout the years, I built my entire career on supporting restoration contractors up until this very day. And and I went out and I ventured out to start my first company, which we scaled up to a North American, arguably one of the top firms, anyways, in North America, that provided equipment rental and drying services across the U.S. and Canada. And I ended up getting into a partnership dispute, and things went sideways, and it ended up me exiting the company, and huge battle and all of that. And several months after my departure, the company ended up going down, and and I was part of the reason that precipitated it, truthfully, because I had to survive and pay for uh, put food on the table for my family. So I started a new company that was actually competing against my previous company. Um, I was starting from the ground floor yet again as a startup. And at that juncture, fast forward, 15 years of being in the industry. And when I first got into it, there wasn't really a lot of drying support and equipment rentals back in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And this second go around, when I started this new business, I realized if I wanted to have aspirations to, be near the top again and be a top performer, it was going to be super hard to compete against, the rental powerhouses of the company that are multi-billion-dollar
Mm-hmm.
market cap companies. And so, assessing that for what it is at face value, like a small little independent trying to, with aspirations of, big dreams, we'll call it. Um, and also being a tech-minded operator, I was trying to think about how can I get to scale and how can I really impact many and all those things. So I kind of, started crafting a strategy on how can I digitize the services that I provide. It's the short story. And within it, I'm like, okay, what can I do and how can we do this? And, being in the equipment rental arena and the drying services arena, and we had a problem internally at our company that, we didn't have a great means and methods to track our gear all over the US and Canada. And then from things like process enforcement and billing and job costing, et cetera, and all these kind of things. And so that kind of brought me to let's build, oh, sorry. And I should also say this is like, and also recognize that where's the industry at with this particular problem too? Because I didn't want to build tech just for us. I wanted to also bring something that I can bring to market,
Mm-hmm.
and then also kind of dial into this longer term strategy that's just starting to come to light now. And so that was equipment tracking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Kahi originally started, and so um, you know we started Kahi and started solving our own problem on how to, you know track fleet, do it really well, and here we are now, um, roughly 5 years later, and we've scaled it up to several hundred companies using our platform, and we're now starting to get into the real strategic part of where the plan is now beginning to be executed on,
Okay.
and some of the things that I've been talking about socially, and you and I have talked
Mhm.
offline about.
So one of those, if you're having an issue with this, then everybody's probably having an issue with this, and we could solve this pain across the industry. So now that you've built a couple of these businesses, you've been successful at it. What are the hardest early challenges in building a company? Is it getting the capital? Is it finding the talent? Is it creating maybe credibility or brand recognition? Is it market resistance? Where do you get the most pushback, do you think, when you start a company?
For me specifically, it's always been a capital constraint. Um, there's no shortage of ideas, at least from my seat, and attracting the right people and good people hasn't generally been an issue for us. It has been a little bit on the field service side. So if I'm speaking to a restorer to restorer, it can be challenging from a labor perspective if the comp isn't attracting the right type of folks.
Hmm.
Traditionally the field service technicians aren't getting paid overly well, generally speaking. So like I understand that constraint.
Yeah.
But for me specifically, it's been largely a capital issue, just for the perspective of like managing growth expectations. How fast can we build? How fast can we scale? You know, as a restorer perspective, like, and I'm sure I know this is common for many. It's like, closing cycle time and getting the cash in from the work that's done,
Hmm.
right? So financing so much of the work that you've completed. So, and for me, it's a capital issue.
Okay. So, in your experience now, what do you think separates an average company, an average organization, versus those elites, those powerhouses that you look up to?
Where I've been putting more thought into Kahi and dealing with the question that you just asked me about, it's centered primarily around uh, an idea on how we can evolve how we mitigate water damage
Okay.
projects specifically. That's my kind of shtick because I'm a drying nerd, and just kind of like thinking about how we can materially impact the bottom line of restoration companies. How can we expand opportunity for restorers through operational excellence, but also in parallel looking at the macro of the industry as a whole, and kind of just understanding some of the challenges that all stakeholders are facing. So like, cash, margin, et cetera, for restorers, but then largely from a carrier's perspective, which by and large are one of probably the primary sources of who ultimately pay for the services one way or another in our space, is figuring out some of the challenges that they're facing, and marrying that, those to what the restorers are actually doing in the field as it relates to water damage. And for me, long-winded answer to your question, it's centered around this idea on data collection.
Hmm.
That's kind of like the kind of just in its infancy right now. Like the industry's talking a lot about data and AI and things of that nature, but accurate data that can then be built into a model, which I've been talking more about, which is called centralized expertise.
Go into
And
that. Talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
so centralized expertise from a modern restoration company perspective it's the restorers are guided by data and specialists within the organization. It's not just whoever's on site.
Hmm.
So traditionally, like, today and in years past, um, work varies based on who's on site, by which PM is um, writing the sheet or the scope. If you're multi-branch, every branch has nuance in how they're addressing and solving problems, and quality depends basically who showed up that particular day, is often the case, right? And so in a world of centralized expertise, when you're guided by data and specialists, a centralized team is reviewing moisture maps, or at some point in the near future, it could be a piece of technology that's doing it. Psychometrics are reviewed consistently. Drawing plans are standardized. Um, Equipment configurations are validated. What else?
Are you saying to build this out within your own individual company, or are you saying this is in an industry wide where you would submit the data? You'd be able to capture the data due to technology, then be able to send it off to a centralized location somewhere off in the distance, and then they come back and say, yes, you're within the specific standards, or no, you need to adjust this.
I
Or is
think
it something you're going to do internally?
so internally for sure to start.
Okay.
And this is around, but I think the other part of how you asked that, I can foresee a future where that could exist as well, perhaps maybe within the framework of like a MRP or a TPA or something like that, or maybe franchise governance. I don't know, as an example, or large corporate governance, perhaps as well. But more specifically, irrespective of like that, which we can double click on if you like, but more from an individual restoration business perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really starting to leverage accurate data to drive consistent outcomes across the entire operation
Mm-hmm.
is the gist, right? And so, you know, in addition to just having, um, you know, a systematic way about how you go approach the work in the field, having a visibility layer on top of all of that
Mm-hmm.
that the ops management team can see into and jump in when appropriate, but also when the field crew are out in the field, knowing when is an appropriate time to connect with the right resource on the team for situational decision making that requires that higher level of expertise, if you will, right?
It's interesting. I love the concept of it. I'm trying to think of through the application of it. And here's the pushback I'd give, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how an owner could start to set this up, and let the technology sort of catch up to them along the ways. Obviously we do a lot of coaching consulting. The first thing we do if you sign on as a contract with us, and I'm sure most consultants are the same way, we need your financial information. We just need to
Yep.
know financially how well you are doing so we know what point A is. And we can't judge the results of the activities and decisions you're making without taking it back to a financial framework. So that financials are not correct on the front end, we have nothing to be able to apply it to on the back end to tell us if we're
Yep.
winning or losing the game. And
Yep.
so if you have business on the majority of the companies who come on board as clients, it's not necessarily there's anything nefarious with their financials, but they're not timely. They're not accurate. They're missing a lot of detail. There's a lot of the story. You're getting the first chapter, you're getting the last chapter, and everything in between is missing.
Yep.
And you have to go
Yep.
back in and build a puzzle basically out of it. So if we've got business owners out there that struggle with keeping accurate financials, which to me is crazy because that's the whole point of, you can be a drawing nerd, but it's a lot more fun to be a drawing nerd that makes money and knows
100%.
they're making money.
Yep.
What are ways that, knowing that a lot of owners struggle with collecting data, even financial data, or whether it's systems and procedural data from being out on the job site, how do you start to build that out? How do you organize that? Big changes this year at the 2026 Violand Executive Summit. The program is now being held July 20th through the 22nd at the Eaglewood Resort and Spa in Chicago, Illinois. This program provides high impact leadership, sales, HR, and accounting education customized for small businesses in the trades. Choose between 12 different business courses and participate in dynamic, peer led roundtables discussing your biggest challenges and opportunities. Learn and network where the best of the best go to get better. Registration is open.
Yeah, so there's a couple buckets which, and I can jump into either, but like, so you have my frame and my world of expertise is definitely like field centric and how that translates into everything else. So I can definitely come at it from that perspective, or you want me to kind of lean into what you're sharing?
No, go with the first one. That's interesting.
Okay, yeah. So like on a drying perspective and water damage mitigation perspective is when we're talking about data, and kind of taking from where most operators are kind of playing in right now and kind of taking to this next level that I'm inferring.
Mm-hmm.
So some simple brass tacks things. Like these are simple things that people can kind of implement right away. Meter selection as an example. So from a hygrometer, most all hygrometers are not created equally. That's for darn sure. And truthfully, there's only a couple that honestly I would recommend if you kind of want to operate at a world-class level as it relates to drying. My preference is Visala. That's the one I go with. Like I'll put it to you this way, and this kind of just hits it home. I think if you were to go, which I've done, go to a third-party lab to validate temperature and humidity type testing.
Okay.
So a lab that does temperature and humidity testing, all of them use Visala.
Hmm.
What does that tell you? I say no more. Like
Yeah.
if the testers are using a Visala, then we as the testers that are doing the real application out in the real world probably should be considering using Visalas. That said, there's still a human element to that, meaning you introduce technician variability due to the human element. So did they let the meter acclimate properly, or were they rushing to collect the reading? Did it come from a cold truck in the midst of winter into the building and they captured their first reading and didn't wait that extra few minutes just to let it do its thing? There's still that risk, even though you're using a quality handheld device. So how do you deal with that? Well, the next thing is to use remote monitoring. And obviously I'm a little bit biased.
Sounds like something you know a little bit about.
Yeah, I know. I've got a PhD in the last 18 months on this stuff. Believe me, I have some serious pain on this particular topic. That's why I know this stuff so well. But remote monitoring is not considered equal either, and so like restorers, and I'll try to be diplomatic about it, but restorers need to do their due diligence in that regard, and really start to ask questions about the accuracy of those sensors. So some companies are grossly inaccurate. Some are quite accurate within certain range parameters. Restorers, we kind of operate on the extremes in terms of temperature and humidities. So like those are the areas of concern. So it's the high temp, low RH, which is often equipment readings, or if you're doing things well in a drying chamber, it should be relatively hot-ish, 90, say, often is the case, and low RH. And what happens is the accuracy starts to drift. And so when we're talking about like precision drying and maximizing the efficiency of your LGRs, which is often the drying appliance of choice in our trade, being able to control temp is huge. And so I'm kind of rambling and going down a geek out version of that, but meter selection by Sala. And so it starts with that. But really, we're in the infancy of remote monitoring. It's still widely not adopted. But what's coming down the pipe is this, the capability around drying optimization, where you can have an industry expert in the palm of a relatively green technician's hands and be able to execute best-in-class drying systems, right? And so that's going to be a game changer, and that's upon us, like honestly, later this calendar year.
So
Which
just
is,
sort of having kind of like having a lawyer on retainer, you're going to have drying experts that through
yeah,
an
but it'll
app
be
or something that you're going to be reaching out to.
through technology. Yeah, but there'll still be a requirement for this, and it kind of circles back to centralized expertise. Like there's lots of things we as an industry can do to systemize our workflow and our processes. But there absolutely is nuance to every single job that we go into. There's slight variances just based on occupants, type of materials, etc. But generally we can run a consistent standardized process, and I've talked about this using the McDonald's analogy. But and the grayness is starting to come in. I just totally lost my train of thought on where I was going with that. But yeah, like the technician will and the operations will have the ability to go in, gather a few data points on what this particular loss is, class, category, size of chamber, etc. Some a few other data points, and it'll engineer a best-in-class drying system based on what's available in the truck.
So then how would you recommend taking that? One of the big pain points, obviously, in the industry is getting paid.
Yeah.
And everybody's fighting invoices, and there's all the different strategies that are out there. But if you have the data on your side, that gives you an advantage. So, what are recommendations then that you have as far as utilizing the data you're able to capture now, assuming you're capturing it best in class standards and it is correct? How are you able to use that data then to reinforce the argument of why you did what you did and why you're charging what you're charging?
Yeah, that's a huge can of worms we can jump into. And so um, how do I be a little succinct and also be provide some value to those that are listening? And so honestly, I think the industry is going to continue to have that struggle as the short answer for the foreseeable ish future.
Mm-hmm.
My belief is um, technology will become, frankly, the answer. I think the reason is this: is like at some point in time, um, we need to figure out how to, and the time is now, but we don't have the capability just yet in adoption, frankly, but we need to figure out how to start building trust between the supply chain and ultimately the ones that are paying the bill. So um, carriers at the end of the day, um, they don't know how to dry buildings by and large. They don't understand the psychrometric readings that you're supplying. So when you ask me like, how do you justify this and that and whatever, it's like without a system for somebody who doesn't understand anything about drying to look at what you're supplying them, irrespective if the data is perfect and the job is flawless, they're trained to negotiate the down
Yeah,
somehow.
you're speaking different languages with them.
Yeah. And so like from that angle, I can empathize those that argue about this particular topic and that it's never going to change. I'm not that. I do think there will be a time where there will be, like I said, tools that will allow, um, we'll call it the adjusters in this case, just for this conversation, to look at the data set being provided, and there'll be a technology stack that's there that can ingest it and basically say this is a good outcome, or this is an average outcome, or this is a not great outcome, and here's why. I think that's going to come. That I think legitimately that's the only way, at least from a drying perspective. And then you're going to have other things that are kind of already coming to market. You got geospatial scanning, which is if done properly, and pre work scan, post work scan, post rebuild, etc. Like however people are laying out, it just provides a lot more transparency to how things are going, and the conversation will just naturally become more a matter of fact and less about feelings and opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the data will eventually get us there, and then we'll see how it plays out. I'm hopeful that trust in the data will lead to a smoothed out relationship between all stakeholders. That's a long-winded answer to that.
But it's a scary answer. I mean, go back to, if I drive my car home today and the alternator breaks,
Hmm.
fairly easy. If I get in a wreck, fairly easy because they can take the bumper off, they can put a new bumper back on, and it's all stock and it can all be taken care of, and we know what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
And all of that, the vertical integration that takes place on that side doesn't necessarily happen on the restoration side because tab A doesn't fit into slot B compared to the last job. Everything's unique and different. But if the data is able to then systemize it a little bit more, it's going to take some of the flexibility out of the industry that allows us to be creative and solve problems. But it's also going to hamper our ability sometimes to be able to solve those problems moving forward if they can rely so much on the data that do they need everything else that we do? Is there a concern there that as this becomes overly systematic, that it could cause huge shifts in our industry?
It's honestly a really great question that needs to be considered
And I
and
don't
be
have the
real.
answer. I'm just,
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers either. Um, but I'll say this, and it kind of it's no different than what I was trying to hit home on the centralized expertise component from a restorer's perspective. It's you know there's is there going to be a silver bullet one day to handle all claims? Who knows? Potentially. I think we're a long way from that. If I'm being, it's just my kind of feeling. But what I can say is as it relates to drying, I think that's something that can be quantified and measured from a fact-based position now. Um, when it comes to like how one goes about mitigating a loss, when you're looking at a commodity claim, you know, what is really complex about it really at the end of the day? And even if we take 70% of commodity claims, 50%, that's still a significant lift in driving um, driving some consistency around on those, and then for projects, claims, whatever you want to call it, that are situational, that's when the specialists come in, and I think there has to be mechanisms in place where, the service provider and whoever's at the other side paying the bill can collaborate and speak from a fact-based position and be like, here's the facts, right? And like,
Mhm.
but drying doesn't need to be that sophisticated, generally speaking, I don't think. So I think drawing absolutely will be one of the first things that I honestly believe is going to become more and more digitized. And
Mhm.
then when you start dealing with structures that are missing like a huge component, and that's specialists are coming in for that, and I think that's,
Too many variables.
yeah, too many variables, and I think that's going to be handled the way it's typically being handled now, but maybe with some of the added tech just to provide you know, more, visualization tools and things to like kind of, help expedite processes and decision making and whatnot. But there's still going to be a huge human element component to it, as far as I can tell, anyways.
Let's go back to building businesses and what that's like, especially restoration or skilled trade businesses that are out there. You work with a lot of companies. You know a lot of restoration business owners in markets all over North America. What do you see as kind of the biggest leadership blind spots that a lot of these companies have? Is it inability to communicate? Is it lack of accountability within the organization? Are there cultural issues? Is it inability to build managers? Is it owners who think they know too much? Where are you seeing some of the ways that companies are getting in their own way?
Um, Man, that's an interesting one. I'm kind of like, my knee jerk, anyways, is leaning a little bit more to the cultural component right now. So like this next wave of workforce that's coming into um, full time work is, these teenagers coming into their 20s and whatnot. Um, and if they happen to be entering into our sphere, um, a lot of this younger generation, they do want to maintain a lifestyle, right? They work isn't everything for them,
Mhm.
they and 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 so the on-call piece is definitely hard, right? And how one manages that, and how businesses are going to adapt to kind of deal with kind of the dynamics that the restoration industry kind of has with it. This is a really hard business. I don't need to obviously convince anyone that's in this type of work of that, but but understanding that and how to build a business model around this next wave of individual that's coming, and and kind of creating models and systems, if you will, that kind of accommodate for some level of lifestyle, but also being able to build a culture where you can get buy-in from these individuals, where they're willing to kind of be come in and help out and just be a little bit more committed.
Mhm.
But I think as an owner, we can't expect them to like just commit to us at just because we give them the job.
Well, let's
You know,
let's go down that building a business model with this next wave of employees and even the current ones. And we do all sorts of research on the different generations and the younger generations that are in the workforce right now. And yes, they are obviously more willing to switch jobs. When I graduated high school, college, you were told go find a job and stick to it and try and last as long as you can. And when you were a hiring manager, if they had more than 3 jobs on the resume, red flag gone. Well, those days are over. The younger generation is taught to switch jobs because you make more money. Statistically proven, the best way to increase your income is to job hop. So if that generation is built towards that thinking, that mindset, and knowing that this industry is so difficult. Nobody grows up wanting to be a water tech sucking sewer water out of a stranger's basement at 2 o'clock in the morning for however much bucks an hour. So how do you build a high performance team in an industry where margins are tight, where turnover is high?
Yeah, this is actually like an area of focus that I'm putting a little bit more attention to. It's actually part of um, my overarching strategy here at Kahi. And so to next to like building beautiful technology that helps restore or scale,
Mm-hmm.
um, the other kind of hair on fire mission that I hope I can at least contribute to solving is creating an environment within the trade where the field personnel can actually make a thriving wage. And so how does that happen? And it's kind of on this question that you're asking me here, and it's we're we're entering an interesting time in the age of AI. So, super high level information is being democratized. The information related work is being democratized, meaning, AI agents, or people powered with AI, are going to be able to do a lot more or do it all if it's an AI itself. There's, if you buy into certain pundits that say there's going to be this mass tsunami of people unemployed because of it, to what extent, I don't know. Truthfully, I'm not going to pretend to know that answer, but it's definitely going to have some level of, I think, pretty fairly significant, if not very significant, impact. Which, in understanding that without getting too deep in the weeds on that, I think actually lends a pretty interesting opportunity for our space. So people are going to start to seek out. I still think and believe people are going to want to have meaningful work. I think our trade is actually quite noble work, even though it's hard. I think it's actually quite fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
We're helping community, we're helping people,
Sure.
and I think that intrinsically offers a lot of value to individuals to have a meaning to what they do. Um, but we haven't quite figured out the comp part, and we kind of need to figure out the comp part, not before, but I'm going to say it anyways, before we kind of really deal with like the culture elements and all the other great things that a really well run organization ought to be doing, right? Like you got to do it for sure, but it makes it really hard, to your point, when margins are tight and you're kind of have this higher power that's always kind of pushing down upon us to kind of constrain our ability to grow from a margin perspective and profitability perspective. And so it's kind of in my sphere from like a tech perspective. I think it's largely a tech solution before it can become more of a human solution, even though we need to be human centric in how the tech is being built. Nuance there.
Yeah.
Uh, but my belief is, over the coming years, fundamentally, the restoration business model is going to be changing, and it's actually coming fairly quickish, I would estimate. Um, my kind of I kind of can't see it happening, beyond 5 years. It's between the next, probably in my estimation, 3 to 5 years is kind of where I'm seeing like um, a fundamental shift in the general makeup of what a restoration business model looks like. And I kind of think we're going to see predominantly two types of models. You're going to see, I think, um, you're going to see, call it field operators that are like a, chuck in a truck kind of thing, maybe a helper, and they'll just be out there grinding and doing the work, and they'll be able to get enough flow to basically earn themselves a very healthy wage. They're out there doing the work, they're doing all the tasks, and
They're going
they
to
can
work
make.
till the body breaks down.
They're going to work to their body break down, but I think they can also do it smart. You can allocate resources. There's means and methods. I believe there's means and methods for a savvy field operator to really make this be a career, no different than a plumber or electrician.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring in help when needed for the more back breaking type activity, and you bring in white gloves for the appropriate white glove type activity, and you can allocate accordingly. But like, to me, there's definitely a place for, the single operator vehicle type individual that can, go out and do half a mil to a mil in mid abatement, mold, whatever type work, and make themselves, you know, a very comfortable, very fulfilling multi six figure salary. So I see that, and then I also see, um, which is more the traditional business model, we'll say, a restoration model as it is today. There's going to be a shift in that, and where it's more going to be, a lot of the back end administrative functions, a lot of the operational functions that are, going to be digitized. Frankly, you're going to be an organizer of capital. You're going to figure out how to, you continue to, arrange a team and build a team to largely facilitate the work out in the field, and the general makeup of the restoration 3.0 business model, or whatever you want to call it, is a lot of that functionality is just going to be fully integrated from data collection from the field right through the full operations. And without getting super deep on all of that, I'm happy to if you want, but without getting super deep on any of it, under that model, you'll be able to like really kind of contain your SG&A costs, your overheads, and through that, they'll still, I believe, will still be able to pay like around a six-figure wage for a field tech, which I think is fantastic. That's a career wage. And the restorer will still be able to make a respectable profit margin, and be quite profitable, because they'll be able to contain other costs, even though like top line revenue expansion might be a little bit more constricted as it is currently.
Yep.
I think we'll be able to find productivity gains within the current capital allocation pie, if you will, where we can redistribute funds accordingly and retool how the business model is made. And that's what I'm kind of see. You're going to see a lot of like solos, and then a retooled business model. And I don't know if I answered your question
Yeah, I think
perfectly.
so. If I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is what you're predicting the next 3 to 5 years is a rapid increase in use of technology and use of AI and use of better business strategy and modules so that we can make the business more profitable. But when you do that, the importance to keep it going then would be reinvest back into the technicians to pay them in a way that allows them to stay and make
Yeah.
a career out of it so that you can turn this into a thriving business with a deep bench.
Yep. With the deep bench.
That's where you're seeing it going.
And then you can start to do interesting things, which I think are, from my perspective anyways, table stakes, which is you're investing in your company's education from a technical perspective, but you're also investing into your company from like, customer service, user experience, sales. Like, the technician becomes much more well-rounded in their capability, when they're interacting with your customer out in the field, and they just become more professionalized, really. And they absolutely need to share that, portion of the revenue with them, so that they do stick around, and have an opportunity to make, a livelihood that they can sustain for them and their family as they, carry on through life.
So let
Right?
me hit you with one more follow-up question to that, and I think we'll wrap it up from there.
Yeah.
Is, right now people will put together $1,000 and say, okay, I want to invest this into my future. Should I go buy Nvidia stock? Should I get an ETF? Should I go buy gold or silver or Bitcoin or whatever it is? Take that same philosophy now and put it back into the business. You're a young business owner. You got an extra $1,000 that is burning a hole in your pocket that you want to reinvest back in the business. In your opinion, today, in order to get ready for what you feel is coming, where's the best use of that $1,000? Is it in training? Is it in technology? Is it spending on culture? Is it spending money to go to events to learn systems? Is it to put it into branding and sales and marketing? Or where right now is the most important place a business should focus to get ready for what you're saying, if they have limited resources? And you talked about earlier, the tough part was the capital. I think that's an answer most people would give. So looking at it from that perspective, what's the best use of the limited capital I have right now?
I'm trying to be very thoughtful about that.
I know. I wanted you to say, buy my product.
Well, I'm trying not to be
No, I get it. I get it.
that
I give it.
guy. Because, and truthfully, my answer, um, my answer right this moment versus my answer in this time next year will be probably very different. It probably in a year from now, even though I want you to buy my product today, would definitely be buy my product. um, just because of the capability piece. So, um, $1,000, eh? Yeah, okay. The thing that comes to like, I really want to be thoughtful in this, but if I was going to just say, like, say you had a couple few grand to invest, I would probably, and you're in the water damage business, I would say go to an E3 class. That is the one thing that would change your business. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's the first time ever with so do you know what E3 is? Maybe, and maybe for those that are listening, don't even, it's the first time they're hearing what this is. So, um, E3 is a technology stack that was first created by Chuck DeWald III. They're out of Fort Wayne, not Fort Wayne, they're out of Indianapolis now. Um, they have a training center there, which is why I'm saying go spend a couple grand on that. They have a flood house there. And this is the interesting part and the part that's super important. First part is this. For the first time ever, leveraging E3 and proper tooling, um, restorers can control the chamber with precision that's never been able to be achieved before at scale. And why that is impactful from a ROI perspective is if you execute when you get home from taking the class and do and actually implement what you've learned, I venture to guess that you'll see a 20 to 30% minimum lift in your equipment utilization on every single water damage job. And that is huge ROI on a couple $1,000. So much so I guarantee it, I'll pay for it if it doesn't. But you got to prove to me that you're actually using it.
And they better
And they
come with
better.
data because you're going to have yours, I'm sure.
I'll be able to look at your data and tell me, and I'll be able to know if you're. So, so like I shared at the beginning, I've been a drying guy since I was a kid.
Mhm.
I'd put myself up against anybody in the trade as arguably doing some of the most complex water damage projects that has ever been seen by anybody in this industry. Um, After taking that class the first time, I was like, open my eyes, didn't fully take it. I had to go back a second time, full candor. Most people do. When I went back the second time, I like legit bought into it and like started instrumenting it. And we changed the fabric and how we operate. And it took us from what I'd argue was already like amongst the best as in drying business. And it like good luck. Like for those that really want to like compare, um, there's a lot of power um, when you can walk into any water damage job and speak with a level of confidence on how you're going to go about tackling a project, especially in these larger commercial type situations where there might be a consultant or a more tenured adjuster or whatever the case may be, and they're going to kind of push back. They're going to pull out all the typical things that we ought to see and thinking they know better than you. Um, but you can go in and engineer a system and really like when prudent and practical, of course, key when prudent and practical, deploy a drying strategy that can largely save everything or a massive percent that otherwise would be torn out. That's huge.
Hmm.
And when you can dry in place, and well, that means controlling temperatures, which is often not the case in especially in commodity claims. In commodity claims, restorers dry like this.
Mhm.
You know what I mean by this? The technician is typically the one that's deciding what the drying plan is going to be.
Okay.
They plug in a bunch of stuff, and then they cross their fingers and hope it works. Like, no disrespect, but
Sure.
that's the truth.
Yeah.
And then you know often is the case, they'll show up the next day if they're monitoring the next day, and the chamber temperatures are like crazy hot, or maybe there's not enough energy and they're not performing properly or pulling any water, um, if they're using an LGR, and like that's just unacceptable. And so that particular class at least will give you a foundational layer and ability to go in and like be basically world class in controlling systems. And I know that the old guard pushing back against things, but like at the end of the day, there is no other tool that right now is able to do it.
Hmm.
And so we're leveraging that tech stack, and we're actually in addition going to be building AI on top of it. And so that's why it's like, yeah, buy my product later. And my product is fantastic now, but the difference is, and this is where people fail. And I just want to, if you
Yeah,
humor
go
me
for
for
it.
a minute or two more, often is the case when myself included, us, all of us, we go to an industry event or we go to a training class. Um, we end up we end up taking in a bunch of fantastic information from, the speakers, the educators, whatever, and we make all these notes, hopefully, and we take in a bunch of information, and then we head back home to the comfort of our day to day life, and we get back into the routine, and next thing you know it, weeks are by, months are by, and you're right back to the same thing, and you never implemented a damn thing.
Yep.
You never implemented a damn thing. So you're just wasting your money spinning your wheels, and like that's unfortunate. And so even if one person takes this advice, is like, if you go there, do the work, I promise you, you'll change your business life for a couple grand. That's the best money you can make, best ROI you can make, guaranteed.
Love it. So I know that you will be at the Restoration Industry Association
Well,
trade
we
show
got a booth.
convention. And when is that? April? I should know the date on that. I want to say like April
April,
26th.
it's yeah, the Monday, I think it's the
Yeah.
26th, 27, 28, 29.
Yeah, down in Savannah, Georgia. So I know you'll be at that event. So if people want to come and see you, definitely register. Come down to the RIA, and great event and an opportunity there. But if anybody wants to get a hold of you otherwise, if they want to talk through Kahi, if they want to talk about building businesses, they want to talk drying stuff, they want to talk technology, you're the guy. How do they get a hold of you?
So Kahi.io
Nice.
is our website. My email is kevin@kahi.io. You can shoot me an email and just say hey, and you want to geek out on restoration, and we can have a chat and go from there. I'm active on Facebook and LinkedIn, so that's also a good space to link up with me and see my ramblings. And I tend to have a bunch of opinions that I like to share with the industry.
Yep. Love it.
But yeah, that's the way to find me.
Well, he is Kevin Dooley with Kahi. I'm Jeff Jones with Violand Management. We greatly appreciate you watching this session. As the good podcasters say, you subscribe and push all the buttons and all the other stuff. If you liked what Kevin had to say here, and we look forward to having you back on sometime soon, Kevin, and we hope you enjoyed this session. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, pal.